Okay, so today I'm going to do something I don't normally do, which is talk about, I've done some discussions on basketball and stuff over the years, usually when playing NBA 2K or something, but the thing is that I predicted for this series kind of lukewarm. Like, okay, I have a few good takes going into this series, right? That seem validated, even though I didn't specifically predict that the Knicks would make the finals. Right, I didn't think they would this year, but like, I said that the Karl Anthony Towns trade was really bad for Minnesota, and he's obviously had a good impact here, helped take them to the finals, had a good impact in the finals. So I said that matchup would be good and better than people realize with him and Wemby. So the first two games kind of showed that. The last two games, maybe not as much. He was more quiet in games 3 and 4. I think he only had 13 points the last game. But the thing is that the finals MVP race is kind of a question. It could be OG. It could be, he had 33 points. So it's not like, oh, he just hit the game winner. It could be OG. It could be Jalen Brunson's been very inefficient. OG is, again, a good rebounder, good defense, good other things. Karl Anthony Towns had a couple good games, but now he's kind of fallen off a little bit. Again, he still has a good impact defensively and stuff, but we all, sports fans and media are some of the most short-minded people. They think in very short term. They'll have like after game one, oh my goodness, Karl Anthony Towns is the GOAT, and this. How long does this fucking take? Like they kind of overhype and overreact to everything, and then only at that point do they, realize the big picture later. So the thing is that I went in saying the Karl Anthony Towns trade was bad for the Wolves, obviously therefore good for the Knicks, so it's had a good impact, so that's aged well. I said that the matchup between Cat and Wemby would be more even than people realize. Again, not saying that I said he would outplay him even, but that it would be close enough to where you could win the series, because again, it's not like Karl Anthony Towns is even considered their best player. So if your second best player can almost match the other team's best player by far, right, then everything else evens out to where you win, right? You balance, it kind of shifts the balance. So it's not that he has to be better than Wemby, and he hasn't been that good, but he's good defense, couple good games, certainly scaring them. Even like on that game winner, I don't know what Wemby was doing, but he might have been guarding Cat or somebody who could shoot a three on the perimeter. He wasn't even in the picture there. But that's one of those like Spurs traumatic moments where a big is not there when you need them. Like Tim Duncan gets subbed out of the game for the not the two Ray Allen shots, the 2 threes, but the 2 offensive rebounds that precipitate that. So it's like, the first time I can understand you're saying, okay, we don't want Bosch or somebody to hit a 3 or one of the stretch players, but you give up an offensive rebound, so you 2 possessions in a row, you don't have Tim Duncan in the game, right? So you could blame the coach at that point. Fool me once, but then you do it again, right? The issue wasn't the 3, right? Because they missed. The issue was the offensive rebounds. But yeah, like even that was like a singular moment more so than a choke, right? So I wouldn't look at that one as that bad. But this has to be one of the biggest choke sort of series that I've ever seen, because not even to be overly dramatic or prisoner of the moment, because it genuinely feels like, oh, the Spurs could have already like won the series, right? They could have actually swept the series, maybe exaggerating a little, but the games that they've lost have been to these like amateur rookie mistakes that OKC must be thinking, where was that when we were playing? That's why, I didn't think they would beat the Spurs, because I thought they would make mistakes like this. So game 2, right, Wemby bounces it off the guy's back and then fouls. Like, the game is still tied, so there's similar situations. The game is tied in that one, so you didn't even have to do anything. Even if you turn it over, you can still get a stop and it's fine, right? But you turn it over for no reason and you foul, and then you lose because of that. So it's 100% choke that had nothing to do really with what the other team did. So it's the same thing here. You're up by 1, right? De'Aaron Fox is getting clowned. When he was with the Knicks, actually, he tries to shoot a 3 when they're already up, right? and there's no shot clock, so he could just dribble it out, but he shoots a three for no reason. I remember that moment. But this is in the playoffs where people are comparing it to J.R. Smith because of, right, so doesn't that kind of cancel out the fact that like if he just didn't get that, then you wouldn't be saying anything, but he gets it and then he messes it up, obviously, by not getting a good shot. But so yeah, when it looks at the choke, just the manner of the choking is what bugs me. Is that, again, game 1 you were up by like what, 14 or something, and then you lose the game by 10. That part I don't mind, because those kind of things happen. You could still consider it like a mild choke, but it's not like a full-blown choke, right? Those things do happen. So that one's a bit of a disappointment, but not the end of the world. You know, I was like, I don't know at what point they led by 14, but so that's a moderate choke, but that's more normal that can happen. The second game was a complete choke because, again, it's tied. You just turn the ball over for no reason, and then you foul as well, and then you lose. So game 2 was a total choke job, right? So there was no reason for that to happen. And then game 3, obviously, you win, but this game 4 you should have won as well. So then it'd be 2-2 and it wouldn't be a big deal, right? So now I had said, that the Knicks would win in 7 was my prediction, which could still happen. In fact, I even did say they would go down 3-1 after the 2-0, and then they'd win 2 in a row. So I did. That was actually funny. I was looking at that game right yesterday, and I'm like, oh, I guess I was wrong about them going down 3-1, right? But it might still go 7, like I said, because they're up by like 30, and so I gave up watching, and then you see that, wait, how the fuck did the Knicks win? So now, oh, I was right then. Like, it's a begrudging kind of prediction. They are down 3-1, like I said, but I didn't think it would actually happen when I'm seeing that, because I would have never predicted that as I was watching it. But no, like now the Spurs will win 2 in a row, since I've been right about a lot of these things to do with this series. But hey, how's it going? But yeah, OG could be the Finals MVP. I don't think Cat is going to be. He had a chance, but I think he's been kind of pedestrian offensively last couple games. Hey, Star, how's it going? So yeah, I just find that very, very funny, because those are like very exaggerated chokes. It's not the same way as, it's not the same way as, like, hang on. Why did my GPS keeps messing up? But no, like, they're not just normal chokes. Like, so this will go down when the Spurs lose, or if they somehow win, that'd be pretty funny. But it'll go down as one of the biggest choke series, not just like one game, not a game, right? As Allen Iverson would say, but just like, it just feels like the whole series is like that. Okay, game 1 you're down by 14, or up by 14, which again, that's not the biggest deal in the world, because those things do happen. But then game 2, you turn it over, you foul, you choke when it's tied. Game 4, same thing. So you could have like swept, basically, is what I'm saying. Game 4, you have a big lead, you choke away the lead, but then you choke away the ending too. Like, you're up by 30. That's a bad enough choke to let them get close. And didn't that happen too in the one that, so I mean, give the Knicks credit for being resilient, but like, that happened in the game 3 too, right? They were up big, and then the Knicks got it close, but then they survived, right? So that was still close. So no lead is safe, I guess, from them, but it's a situation where, again, this game should have been, you're up big, you choke that away, but then at the end you choke again. De'Aaron Fox goes for the layup that you don't need to do. Again, you can just dribble it out. You can, maybe the Spurs franchise just has PTSD from the Ray Allen thing, that like, or not going to take any chances. But even then, they could have still tied it at 3 after that. So like, why not just take free throws? I know it's easy to say that sort of in hindsight. Like I would even say that, well, if he made it, then you wouldn't be saying that. I say that sometimes when people take seemingly bad shots, but that's kind of different because you are up and there's no shot clock, so you don't have to do anything really, right? Just sit on the ball, just wait. Now you could brick the 2 free throws. It's not like he's a bad free throw shooter that he has to worry about that, but you know, like a Dwight Howard type of psychological effect that's going to kill you, but that it'll influence their plays that they make, right? Players like that will be afraid, they will be, you know, kind of making mistakes at the end, but yeah, I like when people will see something. This is just like a general sports psychology thing, is like they'll see something, right, happen, like, oh, Wemby, and now he's the GOAT, and we're comparing him to, you know, LeBron or something, right, and then it gets snapped back to reality. So it's kind of like they'll take it too far, and then it's kind of similar to some philosophical concept that I talk about. It's like being aware of the nature of the process. You'll treat something as though it's an absolute, right? Like love, let's say. Oh, it's love, it's meant to be, whatever. But then you're constantly surprised by how it's not absolute, or constantly insecure and possessive about it, like by society to play into that, to be controlled by it. And even beyond that, you have like, you know, so you're constantly surprised by the fact that it isn't absolute, but yet you pretend it is anyway. And so again, this is like the same to the sports overreaction kind of culture of like, oh, they're going to take it a step too far, and then when they do that, now they'll be shocked, like, oh, how could this happen? But it's not that big of a shock. The shock was, again, them beating OKC. Like, this is still a plus year for the Spurs, but it's maybe one of those that is hard to let go, is like, it's a team that was so young, and they haven't, you know, most of them don't even have playoff experience, and so now, you know, you don't expect to just win the title like that. It would be a accomplishment what they've done, but when you have the chance, it's kind of hard to face that. So that's what I love about it, is like, it shouldn't be that big of a shock, but because you've already kind of overachieved, right? Nobody really would expect this. The Pacers go up 2-1, and Wade is throwing a tantrum in like 2012, and then they win 3 in a row and win the title that year. It's like, some people, oh, now they're Pacers fans just because they want to root against, you know, they want to root against the Heat, right? So sometimes you get that effect. Yeah, like, let's look at that concept of like people want to root against something rather than for something, right? And I have a few expressions to do with that just in philosophy. Like, you know, I would say, I can't remember exactly, but like, people who stand for nothing are shocked by everything, or offended by everything, right? So that you'll be constantly offended and picking at everything else because you don't really have any standard yourself. So you're almost looking for reinforcement through externality. Right, you're not at peace, you're not aware to have anything. You're just like an empty vessel of passion waiting to be told by the corporate media what to do next, or whatever the case may be. Right, we see that effect a lot with the mask vaxxer type culture. And then, you know, so people kind of go along with anything mindlessly like sheep. I don't know, I just kind of wanted to make fun of that a little bit. I don't know if I'll talk about it the whole time. But yeah, I did rep for Karl Anthony Towns. I've always, you know, thought he's underrated. So that would tell you, I don't know, that's just a good prediction. Or sometimes I call my shot too early. I'll be celebrating that prediction, but then, oh, now they'll lose the 3-1 lead and make me look stupid, right? But imagine, you know, Stephen A. Smith almost deserves that for all his clown takes over the years. that like he is a Knicks fan. I won't call him a bandwagon because he's always rep for the Knicks, but it'll be just like an accident waiting to happen, like the Dallas Cowboys. Like, whereas a team that gets too much attention just because it's in a big market, not really because they have anything to celebrate, right? Like, the Knicks are a storied franchise. No, they're not. The Knicks suck. The Knicks are trash, right? You win with Willis Reed and that's it. Nobody wants to hear from you, right? But some of these teams get special treatment. It's almost like a female privilege type of thing. You could do the same exact thing, right? But because it's a Stimuli Acme appealing person, therefore, now we'll give it special attention. Either something that relies on the Stimuli Acme, which is obvious, right? Certain whatever thing like ooh culture or whatever, like the memes like that or whatever. But even beyond that, it'd be a second layer of Stimuli Acme specification, like, or privilege is just like, you'll do something with some merit to it now, but now you still get special treatment because of the Stimuli Acme thing. So it's like that you wouldn't get otherwise. So you're getting special treatment for that. You're getting what else can I discuss here? I don't know what kind of route I got stuck on. This is not the way I wanted to go, but so yeah, what else could I discuss? Like, the Spurs don't feel like they have that second best star type player, right? They maybe rely on Wemby too much. A lot of good players, but they kind of come and go, right, with their reliability. So yeah, you could point to lack of experience, but you would think that wouldn't be an issue. It's almost like they have winners burnout a little bit from beating OKC, that either you could say they're tired, but it's almost like you're more mentally tired. That like they exerted them. So that's the irony of it, is this is a weak East kind of problem. Even if you say, well, how come they're beating the Spurs so badly? That could be part of the reason why. Like, if the East is weaker than the West, then they should lose to the West, right? But because of what the West had to go through to get there, right, versus the East being easier, now that could determine the finals. That's kind of the annoying thing about it. Like, the Spurs have to beat OKC back in the day, to get there, versus the Heat have to beat the Pacers. Like, again, I like the Pacers, but it's just not the same thing, right? So but no, like everything is like X plus factor justification kind of stuff at the end of the game. How about you say it first, right? Anybody can just parrot it after the fact, or like, just weirdest farmland local road that I could have possibly taken. I don't know what this GPS does, but yeah, it's all like recency bias type things and hype, and it's kind of a good analogy. I sometimes use that, like polyfavoritism or escapism and stuff. Media, entertainment is a good way to demonstrate how people are controlled, and even on a serious level. Like, if you look at the kind of that's why, like, you debate sports or something because it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, really. It doesn't really matter. But you debate that to show how stupid people are and how they fall for fallacies, and you might say, oh, well, it's only sports, so it's not that big of a deal. But it's kind of the opposite. Like, if you would do that even with sports, even with something as insignificant as sports, you're still so stupid and fallacious about it, then imagine if it was something actually significant, like, then you'd still fall for the same things, is what it shows you, like cult of personality versus like actual merit, right? Popularity doesn't equal quality. You could look at that in a lot of fields. You could look at like the what else? Like, again, recency bias, emotion, egotism. I could display the nearness postulate, like, oh, you support your team just because they're local, right? You support your team just because they're local, so there's no real meaning to it. It kind of is an analogy for your whole life, in a way that, like, everything you do is just in reaction to what's around you, right? So it's arbitrary. Oh, you'll emphasize on a non-invasive self. There's no standard, there's no criteria. You didn't choose it. You just go along with it and react to it and overcompensate for it. So again, like, remember too, the origin point fallacy of, like, how it was set in place, you would condemn and you wouldn't be allowed to do it yourself and whatever right now, but you would still respect the result of it. So what you're saying is, oh, time is makes it okay. So let's just look at the modern Genghis Khan comes along today and kills everybody and starts an empire, and, like, oh, history is written by the victors kind of thing. But it's the selfishness of the people that come after. It's like, you'll just go along with it. So it's arbitrary, right? Your life is set in stone and, like, defined by things that you didn't choose, you can't control, you couldn't do yourself. You would condemn if you saw them done in front of you. But all of a sudden now it's absolute. It's like somebody did something by force, and that defines your life now. But you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do it by force. So it's a contradiction constantly. It's like, if it's bad, then you shouldn't go along with the result of it. And if it's good, then you should do the same thing. But you do neither. You go along with it, but you don't do the same thing because, oh, now it's bad. So it's like a monopoly over the same, do as I say, not as I do, so that you're not allowed to do it, not because, oh, it's somehow morally bad. You're not allowed to do it just so that the people in power can do it, or prevent you from doing it that would be a threat to them, that they came into power, even by extension, the privilege of empires, by doing it the same way. And so it's kind of the same. Here, let me try to I don't know how you even do that. I think I changed my title because I'm not really talking about the Spurs, or that's what I get to use that ticker for, but I can't really change it when I'm driving. I would do, like, all those different topics and stuff. But yeah, that would have been my prediction, the Knicks in 7. And that still is what I think is going to happen. But, I mean, if you're losing a game like that, I'm not entirely confident. Or it's like there's so many bad things when it comes to predictions. Like, oh, somebody gets hurt, but they won't remember that somebody got hurt. They'll just remember the outcome. Like, oh, haha, your prediction was wrong, you dummy. Meanwhile, oh, their best player got hurt randomly. And now, so what? That could have happened to anyone. Like, it's not very, you're assuming health, you're assuming certain things. Let's look at one fallacy to do with social contrivance is, like, the fact that it's necessary is dumbed down like that. So that's what it serves. And so it's kind of like you're competing at the superficial level of, like, the whatever, just like it's a non-value subversive state that you're conceding, and you're competing over the appearance of overcompensation. But or let's look at, like, this acquiescence fallacy that you would is part of the reason why people care about appearances in the form of something. It's like you're competing with who can keep up the illusion best. Right? Like, everything is absolute in your society, in your time period, whatever, even though it's not, because, again, the origin point is arbitrary by force, etc., even though it's maintained by bypassing critical thinking, indoctrination, even though it's, the non-consensual social contract requires constant overcompensation, reinforcement, distraction. But those things, rather than being seen as kind of negative, that they're necessary, like, oh, why should you need to drink or use drugs to distract yourself, or why should you need to, just, you're supposed to be credible, right? But yet you would do all those things. And so that would be the difference with the absolutists. They would be aware of that and hold it accountable. Like, yes, they might do that too, but they do it begrudgingly, or they do it in a kind of concession, like, okay, that means that there's no credibility. But instead it'll be specified and personalized, and the people who win out in that, perceptively are those who are shameless enough to indignantly insist upon something, right, like non-invasive self-ego. So it couldn't be that, somebody is aware of the nature of the process, they have cognitive dissonance with it, and they choose to not do it because of those hang-ups, or they have some reservation about it. So that's the fallacy of inability this way, that you have, your inability to acquiesce to this specific empire and this specific contrived state, this specific corporate world that we live in. So it's an inability to do something that isn't absolute, that isn't inherent, that's being forced on you, that you didn't choose, that you didn't create, that was established in ways that you would condemn today by force, by, whatever it might be in the historical basis. But yet, it's you're defined or judged by your acquiescence to it. Right, so it's like an emperor has no clothes fallacy. It is absolute, whatever the state you're living in is. But, and it's not even like, you'd be saying like, it should be this instead. It's more just that it's not absolute. It should no basis to force it on other people. And the very same people upholding it and forcing it on you are effectively, they're effectively doing the same thing because, or like, they're not credible. So again, that would be the difference in the two situations, right? If half-mass human function engages in folly, favoritism, escapism, distraction, they would see that as a concession of value. Like, that means they don't have any credibility, the fact that they're doing that. And that means that, they're holding everything accountable. So like, if you truly valued life, or if you truly had any sort of measure or purpose or sense of anything, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't need to do that. So it's a concession to a non-value subversive state. But the half-mass human function in a contrived state would instead be indignantly insisting upon that, this is a normal, natural part of life that is required to cope with the contrived state. So like, nothing discredits you, and you're still able to reinforce a false, absolute, empirical contrived state. You're still able to indignantly insist upon it. So it's a matter of how selfish you are, how materialistic you are, how much you can be controlled by those sorts of things, how much ego you have, versus again, the absolutists would be deferring, or they'd be weary of that. Like, okay, it's the two, opposite interpretation. Do you actually take it seriously, or does it reveal the nature of the process? Like, defined by reaction, again, I'll discuss, like, somebody's watching TV all day or playing games all day. That means that they're in a non-value subversive state. That means that they're doing something that doesn't have any impact, that's, polyfavoritism, that should hurt their credibility, shouldn't it? But apparently it doesn't. Now it becomes a degree of it. We'll be a half-mass human function for some big corporate entity and bow to them, so they reward you, as is man-made, created, could be, curate anything, any result, any empire, any dictatorship, any corporation throughout history. So not exactly credible on its own, but you just kind of go along with it. Every era is absolute until it's not, and the next one, right? So you're not operating on any standard, but you just kind of go along with it. And then that, disingenuous, non-accountable contrivance, that it's intellectual dishonesty that people play into because they benefit from it. So it's really selfishness, some sort of pretense gratification, a half-mass to reinforce dependent over center pretense state, that also carries with it certain limits, but so one of the things to do with that is also the fact that you're basically acquiescing to a man-made creative thing, which could have flaws, it could have ulterior motives, but you take it and treat it as a face value and absolute, right? Rather than at least the awareness and the cognitive dissonance of like, okay, I'm not going to take it that seriously, right? You can go along with it to some extent, but it's not absolutely exclusive to everything else, the way that people treat it. So again, it's an ex post facto justification, it's an impure, biased, subversive state, lacking credibility, right? And the reason why is because you're already kind of put into that, so it's like, nobody is credible. And you might think, oh, but what about you? That must mean you think you're credible. But that's exactly the point, is you would sacrifice that. You would say, no, you're not credible either, but at least you're trying to objectively observe that reality and the nature of a process that has nothing to do with you or your specific state. I guess the false duality rationalization there of closed structure contrivance would be more like, oh, you're trying to justify blank within the contrivance framing. That blank thing that you're trying to justify would be something you're inherently capable of doing anyway. So it's in inverse, right? You don't have to justify doing something that you're inherently capable of doing that just exists in the world, etc. You would have to give a reason not to do it. You'll say, oh, you're only, right, like, it would be self-contained. It's not really a position, but like, oh, the only reason why somebody's being objective is so that they can justify certain behaviors that they would be free to do inherently, naturally anyway, that society restricts, and that somehow you need permission to do things that you otherwise would be inherently free to do. So, oh, you're trying to justify your freedom, but as if you should need to, not that it should be justified why you shouldn't do it. It's like, oh, that would be sort of the weird rationalization, because otherwise, like, everything everybody ever says or does or sees is to cope with the contrived state that they're put in, that they associate with their identity and trait for granted as absolute, versus oh, if you're being objective despite that, oh, you're doing it so that you can be free of the contrived state. That's why you're being objective, so that you're being objective because just to justify certain things that are restricted otherwise, stimuli acme related or whatever. You're doing that to justify that free inherent thing that you're capable of doing anyway, naturally. Yes, you are doing it to justify that then, but rather that you don't need to justify doing it, right? So it's like, it's sort of hard to explain, but the contrivance state is restricting things oftentimes without any reason, and then just to make it easier to control, and then you get some gratification training in the middle there. That's the thing that's hard to take seriously with people, especially if they're older and broken into indoctrination and stuff. They're trained like animals, but they don't acknowledge that, right? Because they're just, this is hard to take seriously. And excesses and exuberance, but it's kind of, they'll give you the breadcrumbs just enough to control you as you're loyal to them, kind of thing. But and why these trucks do this? Like, what is the sandwich fucking box of trucks? But no, the thing is that the only supposed standard is longevity. Like, it's the same thing, but oh, it's just going to last longer, or oh, it's just going to be exploited for some benefit. it's like the unconditional is somehow a bad thing or selfish, but it's like the unconditional would be the only one who's not selfish. They don't want anything, they don't care, right? Versus everyone else trying to exploit something for themselves. So but no, it's like people deep down realize that, but then they cope with it by drinking or by, whatever, drugs and entertainment, escapism and stuff. So basically, what credibility would that person have, right, whatsoever, to outwardly insist or to reinforce the unqualified empirical crime of state? That's why God is kind of important historically and stuff. There is no basis, there is no credibility, but let's just all shut off our brains and then we'll get certain things done and then take credit for that. But by the same process, like, first of all, you're assuming intent. Second of all, it's false absolute being used to justify specific actions and force and, whatever, conquering and stuff, empires and whatnot. But also, you can't assume people's intent, so there's really no basis for that, right? Like, it's like this fake merit because it seems to be based on productivity or something, but it still has that incentive to it, like, but no, do people realize that element, that they're basically trained like animals, and then they insist upon that training, and they're gratified by it, and they need like an ego hierarchy basis to it. So you would never do amalgam theory. You would never do it. You would show off and feel gratified about your zero-sum means that you got through a self-created machination process, but you wouldn't use that, or you'll do it in a way to reinforce. That's the problem. You'll do it to reinforce that state. Right, like, oh, somebody, lives their life, makes money within the contrived state. Oh, we're going to donate to charity or do this or that. You don't want to be free, ultimately. Right, just, period. You don't want that. Like, because again, everything is kind of conditional, but then it goes from conditional to, like, it goes from conditional, like, okay, we'll put up with this for now because we feel like we have to or whatever, but it goes from that to, oh, that's the meaning of it. We'll put up with this, but then we'll pump out kids, and then we'll use that to justify continuing putting up with it, or we'll false, hedonism thing, and then there's like, there's never conditional accountability. Like, let's do it as much as we can, or as much as we feel like we need to, and then hold accountable, and then eventually remove the need for it. Right? Where does that fit into anything? Okay, we need it now because we're animals and we can't control ourselves and whatever. But at what point within our potential, okay, we could remove the need for that and be free of it, right? So it's seen as like, this social contract, but it's really not, because it's not consensual, forced at birth, indoctrinated, but also so that's why it's never about the specific, right? Some will be better or worse, like unqualified monopoly type thing, but it's more that the very basis of it, like, you could say it's, again, the pseudo merit argument again. Well, they're better at what they do, right, than others or something like that, and arguably not even better, but like, oh, it's convenient, it's mass scale, mass produced. But what is the origin point basis of it? Because then again, you can always exploit and squabble over, the spoils, the privilege of empire type thing. But, it's just, yeah, do people realize that deep down that, okay, they're trained like animals, and then everything that they're doing would indicate some imbalance, But rather than trying to remove the need and find that balance, you might think that that's kind of the modern projected answer of things like that. It's about money. Oh, just get enough money and then you'll be at peace, because it's not just materialism or possessiveness, although somewhat. It's also just like the reaction relief thing. Like, well, if you make everything easy enough, you have enough money to, satisfy and overcompensate with hedonism and just make everything as convenient as possible, reaction relief to non-choice needs, then you don't have to think about it. And if you don't have to think about it, then everything is perfect and okay, even though it's still not. And you wouldn't be at peace with it if you did think about it, the unqualified contrivance state around you that you're subject to, right? So that's where money is the false placeholder. It doesn't actually bring you peace to the contrivance state at all. It just removes your need of having to think about it, like the bread and circuses. You just don't have to think about it, so you're defining reality by that, not by itself. What is actual reality? Even the nature of a human-made process. Objective reality doesn't matter, right? The nature of a process doesn't matter. It just matters, you can cope with it, you can distract yourself from it. So you sell out to it. Those signs are always so bad. The Shake Shack, they look so like flimsy and like they don't stand out. I mean, the color of it, like Shake Shack catching strays and absolute philosophy / sports discussion. But no, that's like the specify the conflict fallacy of like, just could you be at peace with something? So like those things, I love that. Like it's the initial minded human function to a T, is that your life is sound and perfect and at peace and balanced, and don't question anything ever, don't think critically, just go along with it, and it's a matter of zero-sum overcompensation to what degree. But it doesn't matter, because like, you have to drink and smoke and drugs and escapism, whatever that coping mechanism is, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just like, wouldn't that indicate that, you're not at peace with the state? But rather than critically thinking about it or addressing it, which you might think, you don't have the power to do, but at least in your mind you can hold that in presence, like you instead distract yourself. So everything is fine if you just don't think about it, and now you're just a slave human function to corporations. And if you do that, so you realize, like, you might think there's some functional basis to it, like, but you have to be productive or blah blah blah, but it's within that human-made corporate set structure that's established in service of unqualified empirical authority monopoly. So it'd be one thing, again, if you're out in nature and everything was concerned with your own survival, and you might think, that might be more challenging, but you'd be surprised how people behave in those things. Like I could do an experiment like that of somebody who supposedly struggles with society in certain ways. It's like, not that they lack ability, but they're being restrained, right? So it'll be like, they don't need to do a lot of these artificial things that are only necessary to control them. They're deferring, they're acquiescing, versus, so you could exploit the contrivance state, but you have to acquiesce to it. It's like you'd have to really explain that. That's why it's opposed and false duality, fallacy of inability, all these labels and stuff. What would be the reason why somebody wouldn't do that? Right? Like, they lack the ability to do it. But if it's worth doing, or if it's, so like, I don't get it. Or, they would even benefit from doing it. So they would sacrifice that for a certain reason, as if that couldn't be a choice. Whereas with that assuming of intent and projection is pretty strong. Variable, free things cannot exist. So that's why, like, this shows you're a trained animal within a modern mechanization process. Somebody from a tribe, right, comes into society and is kind of acquiescing to it temporarily, right, just for a little bit for some reason. They're just passing through, and they're at peace, and they live their tribal lifestyle, or they're a nomad who changes their lifestyle everywhere they go, or whatever it might be. And you'll constantly look, you'll constantly look at them and have your cognitive dissonance. You have to judge them. Oh, look, they're dressed differently than you, or they're not hardly dressed at all, or whatever it is, right? You have to judge that. Not because of the inherent reality of it, which could be debated. People have done that throughout history. People can do all kinds of different things. Like, it doesn't really matter, right? There could be some functional basis to it. So you don't really have a standard. You're just you're judging it to cope with your own cognitive dissonance of a trained, controlled, tame state that, it's kind of like religion. Every other one has to be false and yours has to be right. So what you're wearing is kind of arbitrary, made by some big corporation in a factory that might have used child labor or whatever. It could be all kind of issues with that you would have, but you're not aware of, you don't think. But regardless, it's arbitrary. It doesn't mean it's bad, but it's not absolute exclusive to everything else. That's why you have to attack everything else, because you're not at peace with it. So when you judge and look outwardly like that, you're judging somebody else because you're not at peace with your own state, because it isn't absolute. So what you're doing is not only not an objective observation or any criteria or standard, it's nothing more than ego insistence upon a structured, trained state. Almost like ego gratification over compensation. That, you have to poke fun or issue at that and almost frame it as it within the false duality of like, look at them, they lack the ability or resources to do the thing that we're doing, because what we're doing has to be the only thing that anybody can do, and we're assuming that this is the only lifestyle possible, even though we're well aware throughout history and throughout other parts of the world, even now, people live in vastly different ways. And just on an inherent level, people can live in various different ways as a possibility, as a hypothetical. So what it means is that you have to judge outwardly because you're not at peace with your own state. And so the only way to try to rationalize it is to attack and judge and ridicule everything else in existence except for the one specific state that you happen to be in. That, again, the origin point could be questioned. So that's the problem with objectivity or neutrality. It'll be projected like as if in favor of something else or something specific, but it's really, right, just not even in rejection of something specific, but it's in neutrality. Right, it's in neutrality because it's not saying, what you should do. It's just more so holding accountable what you are doing. So you'd rather have cognitive dissonance with it than reinforce an system on it. But people are selfish in that way. They'll sacrifice and sell out their mind for their physical state, exuberance, hedonism, right? Zero-sum means functionalism. So even that argument on like the privilege basis, like, as if thinking is a privilege or as an outward thing. Everything's turned into ego, train, hierarchy, compete, pray, kind of a false duality, half-mass thing. But it's a situation where that would be just a challenge. Like, think objectively, be aware, consider everything qualified first, and then decide your lifestyle or something from there instead of ex post facto justification. We're already put in this state by human beings, by other people, carefully curated corporate structure, etc. And now we're coping with it, we're reinforcing it. Right, so it's nothing more than how do you cope and overcompensate with this unqualified subversive state. So that's why it's not about the self, it's about the standard. It's not about the specific, it's about the inherent reality. So you could reveal that, but it wouldn't matter because people are sort of wedded to it. So again, that's why a false absolute contrivance has to censor everything else out of reality. They have to censor everything else because they're not at peace with it. So like to create the illusion, because like how do you really rationalize that? It's similar to the false absolute to specified or value. It's like, it's not true objectively, but you bypass it with ego and emotion. And again, emotion is nothing more than a rational insistence upon the self, right? Exposure and nearness, like, you know, so it's more like the coping mechanism of like, well, maybe you'd want to sleep with a different person every day and supermodels and whatever, but oh, you don't have that opportunity, so now you'll pretend like, oh, you're the only one for me kind of thing. So you would know deep down, like, okay, you're just pretending to do that because it's easier to control for society or because you lack the resources to do other things, but it's just kind of projected. And then that's right. You almost have to overcompensate for the unqualified contrivance state, or socially personalize, or make it about the appearances, right? You have to perform it a certain way or overcompensate a certain way because they're not at peace with or aware of the nature of this process. So you know, if you take the ego and incentive out of it, people don't actually value human beings at the base amalgam level. They do it as a dependent, overextended, pretense, specified. So you sacrifice specific for amalgam, right? Somehow bad, because again, to them, it's like you hold the same process accountable. To them, it's just a pretense that they're using to reinforce their dependent, overextended, specific state and exuberance. They don't really care about that, and the actual act of caring about that would be a threat to them. That'd be a bad thing. They'd have to condemn and prevent it because it would make them look bad. Because like, oh, look at somebody doing something unconditionally because they actually value it, versus, oh, they're just pretending to value it to reinforce an exuberant state that arguably creates the problem in the first place. Like recycling a bottle in a society that, like, if you really care about the environment, you wouldn't be living in modern society, right? Which creates all the damage to it that you would see, like the sheer number of people even being the issue, but even then, not really, because you know, you could be much more minimalistic even within that confines. There's nothing more than exuberance bred in circuses that you would think, that you might think, oh, well, just let people have their fun and do that. But then it would lead to a secondary issue of credibility. What credibility do people have then? And the answer is they don't. That's what, like, you know, in that context. But then, so it becomes a contest of contrivance. You all have the same process. It sort of shows you a lack of awareness on the initial basis. Things that you're aware happen and apply to everybody, but if they happen a certain way, you're reacting to the externality and initial basis. So like, okay, I'll give you kind of a graphic example, but like, again, it becomes a contest of contrivance who can like frame and portray themselves the best way, even though that's just a myopic, you know, carefully curated thing that you should take with a grain of salt and realize, well, they might curate the image for themselves, but there's a lot more to them than that, and everything inherent applies to them too. Like, let's say, oh, somebody, we know that everybody poops, you know, all the time, right? That's just a natural process. But oh no, some politician does it up on stage, on, you know, and now you would say, oh, look, he's that guy who did that up on stage. So again, you could say, well, that's maybe you should have prevented that or been whatever, better prepared. But the point being that it's something that you know that everybody does. So does it really define something? So again, you're looking for like this weird initial bit. Who can like fool me the best? Oh, the one guy just did that 5 minutes ago in the bathroom, but this other guy did it up on stage, right? While giving a speech. So again, maybe not the best planning or preparation. You would use that to say, oh well, you know, if they're doing that, they really shit the bed. Am I right? But something, again, like the nudist colony example, it shows you that people are both not aware of the nature of a process of inherent objective reality. They're not at peace with their natural selves, or again, with nature or reality. So they have to deny it and curate it such that they can be controlled. Because that's really what it leads to. Pretend everybody walked around naked. They can still have the presumably, discipline to not do anything. You can still consent and everything is, respectful. But you're assuming that people lack that compunction, but it's kind of like, it's more than that. It would give people too much freedom in that way. So again, people's minds are reduced to the physical state. Your infinite objective mind that doesn't have limits is reduced to your limited physical state, and you're a slave to that, and you enjoy that, and red circuses gratified initial minded thing. But even by the same measure, it's just not. Unconditionality or amalgam theory, something like that, something that would actually require you to sacrifice your current way of life, which is outward. Everything is outward. Everything is always outward. Right? You'll treat it as a false default because you're indoctrinated and ingratiated into it. Your lifestyle is not normal or default or anything like that. Right? It's not absolute. It's outward, defined by corporations, by monopoly, by governments, by a lot of things that are exuberant and excessive, and so you can do those things if you want, but then there's some accountability that goes along with it. Like if you vouch for the state, you can say, well, if you're a part of the state too, you should vouch for it too, right? So you'd rather indignantly insist upon that no matter what, that you didn't choose, that you're subject to, than to have some awareness and cognitive dissonance with it, right? So again, it becomes a contest of who can overcompensate best for this state that you didn't choose, that you would condemn the origin point, right, that's based in unqualified empirical authority. Nice roads, by the way. This is what I pay taxes for. Like, I get one patch here and there, but what the fuck is that, man? Maine had some notably shitty roads in certain places that I showed off. It's like 94 degrees somehow. But no, like, people want to be defined by that kind of reactionary zero-sum functional state rather than be free of it on an inherent level. So everything's projected on like the ego basis level of like, just there's no standard, it's all just half-assed competing on some hierarchical basis. So if it doesn't apply, or you don't care, you don't need anything, that's somehow a negative, because you're supposed to, people are used to that thing. So they project an incentive even if it's not there. They project the artifice necessary to accompany the incentive, even if it's not needed. So your RBO protocol trained is what I call it. Like, you know, a good example is like how you look at people in modern society, like the human functions, the cashier at the grocery store type of thing. You are the collective mass middle class that creates why AI is going to take people's jobs. It's your fault because you would use those things or self-checkout and stuff, but also it's because you don't really value people. You've already been trained to treat people like machines in a way, right? You'll socially gratify whatever initial, but it's like you're already trained to react that way or have certain expectation. But somebody is free or neutral or unconditional or has like some other measure, right? Like, oh, they're only doing it for this reason or to remove the need or to free the process. Then you know, they make it clear, okay, they vouch for the state. So what it means is that it means that like you know, it'll be projected even if it's not there. It's like, oh, that's what's necessary to control us through monopoly over nature, empirical basis. What if that's not the basis? What if that isn't the only basis? What if that's not what you prefer or choose or value, right? What then? And so, right, like that's the false duality, emperor has no clothes thing, is like, okay, can you just that's kind of the indignant insistence fallacy a little bit, is that like you there really is no standard, but you're shamelessly just pursuing self-interest with a pretense gratification. So you're not aware of the same process that somebody else would have cognitive dissonance with, or you know, you don't have a criteria standard, it's just ego insistence. And so really what people react to is like their own cognitive dissonance with their false absolute contrivance state. If somebody is free or variable or does or values something different, so it's assuming your intent too, and all that is like, if that doesn't apply, right, whatever their preconceived notion is, right, whether it be stimuli-acme projection, zero-sum mean, some other social contrivance ego basis, it doesn't matter if it doesn't apply, because right, it'll be projected anyway. So that's more their issue, that they have cognitive dissonance with their false absolute contrivance state, that anything else of human behavior, of anything else that exists, any other lifestyle, anything in the world, anything even in history, that would trigger their cognitive dissonance with their false absolute specific state. So it's not an attack on the specific state, it's not in favor of another specific state, it's the reality and observation of reality in terms, right? So you can't assume somebody's measure or intent that way. Even some pseudo zero-sum functional efficiency is fake, because it's like, it's half mass. Again, everything mass produced suffers inequality for it. If you truly valued that, if people truly valued human life, it wouldn't be valuing that overextension, but that's what people do, is like, it's more about mass production, overcompensation and stuff. There's like the credibility check, right? The person who's aware of the nature of a process or has cognitive dissonance with it, they're the issue because they exhibit that. They lack the ability to do this absolute thing. The same thing by which the other people who would be indignantly insisting upon it would require certain imbalances, certain overcompensations for their own imbalance, how they're not at peace with it either, but they keep up the appearance of it. So again, it's basically a show, but it nature of the process is the same and you didn't set it in place, but it's your responsibility as an indoctrinated sheep, slave, animal, trained animal. It's your job to overcompensate for it. So it's judged through you, right? False, absolute, contrived state. Don't think about it. If you did, you would have issue with it. Cognitive dissonance, not absolute, exclusive to everything else. But it's the individual subject's responsibility to overcompensate for it. So if you're neutral, unconditional, you're aware of the nature of the process, or you don't vouch for the process, or you have some other measure, it doesn't matter because that projection supersedes it, because false duality ever has unclosed fallacy necessary to reinforce that contrived state reactionary basis. So what that means is basically you would be in a position to I always forget how long this part is now. It's still like a few more minutes for me. Or yeah, that's the one thing that there's a lot of here is Tim Hortons started to get more common here as you get towards Rochester, Buffalo. But yeah, to wrap up on the NBA thing, imagine if the Knicks choked that away. That'd be unbelievable. Or worse. The question is, do you vouch for that? And the question is, see, it'll be framed in a certain way, like, somehow self-interest. But, like, suppose somebody's willing to sacrifice everything to be free. Then is that the concession? Versus people who are selfish in this way, for convenience, for exuberance, excesses, reaction relief, you're willing to sell out your mind and freedom that way, so that you get reduced and controlled by your physical state, so you're not at peace with it. It's like somebody who's at peace in mind, they don't need all those things, right, as much or whatever, but like, you put yourself in a position where you'd rather create the illusion of a false absolute half-mass state than to be fully aware. So you'd rather not think and then, everything seems fine. Versus you'd rather think about that same exact process and, now you have issue with it. So thinking becomes the enemy, shoot the messenger kind of thing. It's also a position where, again, so which is selfish? You would sacrifice those things to be free in mind, at peace, minimal, even more minimalistic mindset, versus you would sell out your mind, you would sell out your, infinite objective nature, inherent freedom, natural self, you would sell it out just to be controlled at half-mast by your inherent tendencies in reality, with like a revisionist history of redefining of what people are. You would have to do that to rationalize the overextended exuberant state that has no credibility. So you would sell out your inherent freedom and everything, and nature itself and your children, and you would do that in service of unqualified empirical monopoly corporations, etc. Modern lifestyle. And for what? Just to get back half-mass of the inherent, to create this illusion, to create this, and so it's for nothing more. Like I say, that human achievement is nothing more than reaction relief, zero-sum needs, means, hedonism, overcompensation, and nature itself, resources. You would sacrifice. So there's no real meaning. So what is the selfish basis there? Is like you're willing to food, but eating food is a natural need that you have. That's like there's no special. You're trying to overcompensate with hedonism for like food that tastes better, or you're trying to make it easier, more convenient, right? Reaction relief. But yeah, like contrivance will prey in this way, like it tries to prey on every little thing and try to define it and frame it a certain way to rationalize its own false duality, contrivance state. Not that's why it's kind of amusing from an objective perspective. It can be a little silly how it looks. Like you could be trying to reveal and observe the nature of a process, but instead it'll be projected and framed as the process, like, it's your inability to do it, or it's somehow right you doing the same thing because nothing else can exist, and you can't be revealing the artifice of a nature of a process. But what you realize is, it's just an inherent process that exists, and now it's framed and controlled and reduced to a half-mass, specified and controlled. The best example is the stimuli, how people are trained to do it if you want, but it's not how you wouldn't be at peace and you would project it. It's a constant conflict that's self-created. So again, nobody's telling you not to do it, but you're pressured so heavily to do it, and you would outwardly insist upon. It's that privilege kind of indignant insistence. You would have children and vouch for the contrivance state, but that's supposed to give you credibility. That's supposed to give you credibility. Right, rather than take it away or hold you accountable to it. Right, that must mean you vouch for the unqualified empirical authority, monopoly, structure, corporation, lifestyle. You must vouch for that. You couldn't just be some horny, hedonistic animal just reproducing with no regard for human life. You couldn't be that. But that means that's the biggest disqualifier of credibility, is you have children within a contrivance state that you don't vouch for, that you have conflict with, but you overcompensate with bread and circuses. So it's all about the self, right? It's a very selfish thing. Well, you have adequate bread and circuses to overcompensate for the cognitive dissonance or whatever, so you put up with it. You sell out to it, right? You're a slave to it. And then you reinforce it and rationalize your hedonistic, through the hedonistic lens, you rationalize, just that limerent siphon training would be kind of funny. But, you play along with it even through a preconceived lens. Okay, that's good.